Welcome to the Revolution of Man podcast. I'm your host, Lance Cashion. This is episode 40, and this podcast is an extension of my blog, Revolution of Man, at Substack, so you can go there and check everything out that I've written and also other episodes as well. And this is a special episode because this was recorded live at a community forum that we hosted, the Forge Room Foundation, along with Stones Taskforce on the World Cup and human trafficking. The FIFA World Cup is coming to the DFW area in June through July, and we wanted people to be aware of what law enforcement's doing to prepare, as well as how to get engaged and fight human trafficking. Our keynote speaker was Sergeant Tarik Muslimovic from Arlington Police Sgt, and he heads up their human trafficking unit, and he also serves on the North Texas Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, as well as the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force. So he lays out everything that law enforcement's doing to prepare both locally, statewide, and federally. And then we're also joined by another speaker, my friend Carrie Grace from Stones Taskforce, and she gets into the community activization piece, how you can get involved in the fight. You're going to learn a lot of great information. I hope that you enjoy and you learn a lot from this episode 40 of the Revolution of Man podcast. Thanks for listening. See ya. My name is Lance Cashion, and I'll be your host this evening, and we've got a couple of incredible guests tonight, and we're going to be talking about the World Cup and human trafficking. The FIFA World Cup will be here in June, and will run until about mid-July. And we're going to hear from Sergeant Muslimovic, who's going to run through everything that law enforcement's doing to prepare for the World Cup games. There's going to be an influx of human trafficking and exploitation with a lot of sporting events that occur. And then Carrie Grace will be providing some action steps, some ways to get involved. Just ordinary Christians, just like me and you, we can all do one thing to fight human trafficking during the World Cup. So a few statistics real quick. There's an estimated 35,000 people per day that will be entering the country for the World Cup games. And it's being hosted in several cities, 2 in Texas, in Arlington at Jerry World and AT&T Stadium, and then also in Houston. And you're going to hear about some of the collaboration between law enforcement between the 2 cities. But imagine that, 35,000 people per day coming into the country for the games. A lot of them are males with disposable income, wanting to have a good time, go see the games, things like that. And as you can imagine, there's the opportunity for those traffickers, people that would exploit women, children, boys during that time, that we need to be on the lookout for it. So the United States is the number 1 producer and consumer of pornographic material in the world. We create the demand for our own people. Most of the trafficking that happens in the United States is Americans trafficking Americans. It's a lot of people, there's a myth that it's all coming from the border. That's not true. The percentages are extremely high, and it's Americans trafficking Americans, and we're driving the demand for our own children, essentially. It's sad, but as Christians, we can do something about it. This isn't the first time that we've fought slavery, because that's what trafficking is. It's slavery. William Wilberforce, the Clapham sect, ended slavery in Britain. That washed over into the United States. We fought a war over it. And we have the ability, we have the history, we have the truth, we have God on our side, that if we will just get engaged, we can win again. There's a saying, or a quote that says, when the light of the world retreats inside the walls of the church, the world becomes a very dark place. And that's what's happened in the last 60, 70 years in America, that church is seen as something that you do, it's a very private experience between you and Jesus. You go to church on Sundays, but the secular culture says, don't you dare step foot or speak in the public square. But the public square is exactly where we need to be speaking the truth. Because when we abandon the public square, when we abandon the culture, dark forces will happily take that ground. And there's always victims when that happens. So the Forge Room Foundation, it's a nonprofit. We're essentially advancing the kingdom of Christ in our city by forging Christians who think biblically, live boldly, and shape culture in the city of Fort Worth. And human trafficking is one of the core issues that we have to face. If we can't protect the most vulnerable in our own city, what are we doing? We have to engage. And I'll always tell you this, one person can't do everything, but one person can do one thing, and it makes a huge difference. A huge difference. You doing one thing makes a big difference. So tonight, we're going to go through a lot of material, and but from a worldview perspective, as Christians, we have to understand that every human on the planet is made in the image of God with intrinsic value, worth, and dignity, and every life is worthy of protection, particularly the vulnerable, those who cannot speak for themselves, those who cannot fight for themselves. We are their guardians. We're the church. And so that's a worldview perspective, is that every life has value. Fundamentally, from womb to tomb, we believe that. And so trafficking is a direct attack on the image of God, because every human being is an image bearer. And when someone exploits another human being, they're attacking the image of God. So special thanks to our co-sponsors, Stones Taskforce. You're going to hear more about the crew later. And we are a crew, and it's amazing the work that Stones has done in Tarrant County over the last, say, 15 years. 15 years. So Felicia's here. She's the oversees everything at Stones. She herds all the cats, so to speak. So thank you for your sponsoring this, Felicia. And then also like to thank Southwest Christian School. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. Okay, let's pray together. Well, Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for your mercy and your grace in our lives. Thank you for the opportunity to gather. We thank you for life. We thank you that you've given us a voice. You've called us into a mission, that we are a workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, that were preordained before the foundations of the world, that we would walk in them for your glory, and with your power. We can't do it without you. So I thank you for this time together. I pray that it would bless you, that it would encourage and equip us to enter the battle, to be a voice and stand firm for those who can't stand on their own and who can't speak on their own, that when the light of the world goes into the darkness does flee. And so we give you all thanks and praise. In Jesus' name, amen. So I first heard Tarik Muslimovic probably a couple of years ago at a Five Stones meeting, and then I heard him a few weeks ago at a NET MACE event, which is Men Against Sexual Exploitation. And I was like, we need to have him in for a forum and expand the knowledge base, allow him to share everything that he's doing and all the task force he's a part of, what they're doing around the World Cup. And the World Cup is just a flash in the pan. Human trafficking doesn't go away when the World Cup goes away. You know, Fort Worth, Tarrant County, and DFW area is one of the worst places in the country for human trafficking, particularly of children. It's staggering right here in our own backyard, our own schools, our own neighborhoods. And you have men like Tarik that are right there in the fight, and we should support our law enforcement, all of our trafficking units and heat units and ICAC, all those. We need to be supporting them because they're right there at the point of friction in the darkness, and they need to know that their community supports them. So Sergeant Tarik Muslimovic has been with Arlington Police Department since 2008. He holds an associate degree in business and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the American Intercontinental University. Promoted to sergeant in 2017, he has served in multiple specialized roles, including Special Response Team, which is and SWAT. He holds a Master Peace Officer and a TCOLE. So many acronyms, you guys. Advanced Instructor Certification. He led the Crimes Against Children Unit for 3 years and now supervises the HEAT Unit, which is the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit, overseeing investigations into child exploitation and human trafficking, and leads large-scale proactive operations focused on victim recovery and reducing demand. Sergeant Muslimovic also works with the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force, the North Texas ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and supervises task force officers with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So please welcome Tarik Muslimovic.
Good afternoon, evening. Here we are. Evening. Lance, thank you so much. It's always really awkward when your bio is read, a bio that you wrote. So I apologize that you have to listen to that, but I am very honored to be here this evening. Thank you all for being here. I can't promise you that the presentation is going to be great, but I can promise you the view is going to be fantastic. This is amazing. I just want to face this way the entire time, but that'll be rude of me. So we're going to talk a little bit about human trafficking. It's a topic that's very near and dear to me, and I wish I can kidnap you all for a week and talk about this. But I can't. I have a limited time, so I'm going to touch on what we're doing, who we are, how we respond to this crime. Lance mentioned I'm from Arlington, but that is just a city, right, just east of us. That means nothing more. I'm a big believer that this crime travels, and we as law enforcement need to come together. We community members need to come together, work together to fight this crime. So we talked about some of those task forces, and I'll elaborate on that. But we'll talk about that, and obviously the big elephant that we're going to have to eat in June and July, FIFA World Cup, okay? So we'll talk about those things. My background, I need to address this because you're going to hear me talk. You're like, this guy has an accent. It's weird. He's wearing cowboy boots. What's up with this guy? I'm originally from Bosnia. I grew up in Germany, okay? So you had Bosnian, you had German, you had whatever you want to call English. That's what you get. And so I just want to address that. But my background really brings me today all the little hurdles I had to overcome. You know, I was talking to Carrie earlier. This is not a hobby for me. Human trafficking is my job. It's my passion. And that's something you're probably going to notice as I'm up here talking. So we'll get started a little bit about our HEAT unit. So historically, crimes of human trafficking have been investigated by vice units. And that was also true in Arlington. You heard Lance talk about earlier about me overseeing the Crimes Against Children unit in ICAC. That was true, and I used to oversee a team that investigated child sex trafficking. At that time, in Arlington, our vice unit investigated adult human trafficking. Well, we were our own enemy. We had policies in place that were putting hurdles for our detectives. We had policies in place that interfered how we treat victims. We had absolutely no success rate going to trial. None of our cases were being accepted. So we were a big goose egg failure. And I'm not blaming our unit at that time. It's just a systematic failure that we needed to recognize, and our chief of police did. So we simply, he came up to me and invented a plan and said, look, we're a large city. We host major events. We need to have a human trafficking unit. I was very fortunate to be able to, at that time, take one of my best detectives that worked ICAC, bring him over to what we developed to be the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit. And then we, at that time, this is 2022, beginning of 2023, we added a fourth detective, which was Rachel Fiorella. And the thing about Rachel was she came to me from narcotics. She had a vast experience in undercover work, which you'll learn through some of our things that we do is a necessity. And then as we grew, and I hate to say that, we're growing, and we're growing because there's a demand. We need to grow. We need to combat some of these crimes, right? So I was able to add another detective, and so now I'm sitting at 5 detectives. 2 of them are with the task force, one with HSI and one with FBI. The reason that's so critical as we talk about FIFA World Cup and all these major events is if a victim landed in my arms right now and I found a perpetrator, I found a suspect, based on the circumstances of that case, we can dictate if we want to take that with our awesome prosecutors here in Tarrant County, or if we want to take that case and elevate that to the federal prosecutors. So that's the strength of having those 2 task force detectives embedded in my unit. I have something on the bottom here that says Digital Forensics Unit, and it's in red. By a show of hands, who here has a cell phone? Come on, I know everybody's got one. Who here has 2 cell phones? A couple of you guys? Anybody have 3? So Lance and I, and that gentleman over there are the only 3 psychopaths here tonight. Congrats, gentlemen. But yes, I unfortunately, I know they do too. 3 phones is massive, right? Understand something, everybody raised their hand at least on 1 phone. Well, that's true for our suspects. That's true for our victims. All of them have digital components attached to these cases, so I need a digital forensics unit that can take those devices, extract them, put it in a format where people like I can read them, and so we can move those cases in a successful manner. So we have an attached digital forensics lab and unit to my unit, which is a very, very important thing. This is strictly for Arlington. As I mentioned, we investigate human trafficking and child exploitation. That is a mouthful, no matter how you dissect that. But if you look at the slide, human trafficking and all their lesser included offenses are up there. And, you know, all that really, what that means is if we can't reach elements to an offense of trafficking of persons, maybe we can then work with the prosecutors and reduce that down to a promotion prosecution, aggravated promotion prostitution, whatever it may be. If I can put a gun charge on somebody, if I can charge somebody with a robbery but they have a nexus to human trafficking, I will do that, because prison food tastes the same. No matter what offense you've committed, it's the same, and that is our end result. Keep these suspects accountable and not have legal matters staying away from prosecuting great investigations. The bottom part, you'll see online solicitation of a minor, possession, promotion, production of child pornography, sexual performance by child, and invasive visual recording. All our offenses tied to child exploitation. So when we created this unit, it was important for me to keep that as a part of our investigations. We often see exploitation exist with the youth. That carries over also as they become adults. That is the name of the unit, human exploitation. That doesn't have to be an adult or a child, would take it all. And that's the mission, that's kind of the mindset on how we operate. So we broke the unit into 3 components. These are the first 2. We do proactive operations. You heard Lance read my bio, victim outreach and demand suppression. I'm gonna just focus on those 2 real quick. These are things we're gonna be doing for FIFA. These are the things we do routinely year round. We partner with some awesome law enforcement teams like Fort Worth Police Department, the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force. We work very closely with Mansfield and some of our neighboring cities because we all have to come together to be effective in this. So victim outreach is where we target potential victims that are engaged in commercial sex. It is very meaningful work. It is, I tell you, I mean, I worked crimes against children before. There's something that I always have a soft spot when I have to respond to the hospital and there's a 2-month-old that's been severely injured by a parent, and then walking that all the way through justice. There's also something about recovering a victim out of a motel or hotel that's been trafficked for weeks or months, even years at times. A person who hasn't eaten for a very long time. Guys, these people are just not gonna fall out of the sky. We as law enforcement have to go find them. And so it is that type of work that is meaningful, and these detectives that sign up to do this every day do it really well. Demand suppression. Lance touched on this earlier. If we didn't have men going out there buying sex, I wouldn't be standing here today. task force, the Five Stones Taskforce, with all the great work that they do, we can find something else for them to do. But we do. Unfortunately, we have that. And I say men because it is predominantly men. And almost every one of my demand suppression operations, or also known as John Stings, it is predominantly men. And the demand is so high. My current personal record best on an operation I've done was 34 arrests in one 12-hour shift. I can spin that computer up right now, and I can probably have somebody show up to a hotel any given place, any given time, because that's the demand of fuel sex trafficking. Online solicitation of a minor, we cannot forget about this category. It's so crucial. These are suspects, predominantly men, who have a sexual interest in children. Don't even want to pay for it. They'll seek out children for free. So that is when we portray ourselves as children online. Probably most of you guys are familiar with the show back in the day, How to Catch a Predator. I play a great 13-year-old. Okay? But all kidding aside, it's again one of those things. There's a satisfaction when you think a suspect shows up to a location thinking they're going to be engaging sex with a kid, and they get greeted by our SWAT team. Okay, there's a satisfaction, but with these proactive operations that I explained to my chain of command is I don't have to sit behind a desk and wait for cases to fall with real victims. These victims being children, loved ones, sisters, brothers. I don't have to wait for those cases because I can put my undercover detectives out there, and we can effectively reduce those numbers with our tactics and approaches. The National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, very important. Those cyber tips come in. They come in large volumes. These are reported tips, credible tips, that allow us to then take that information and pursue a suspect. They're lengthy investigations, but so are the top three. And we just, again, it's one of those investigations we just can't simply neglect. Illicit massage business investigations. Who in here likes massages? Come on, don't be shy. All right, there we go. Yeah, we do, right? And I want to make sure that you guys, when you go get a massage, you're at a safe environment, at a safe place where nobody will victimize you or your loved one. Because there are more illicit massage businesses than there are Starbucks and McDonald's in our regions. And that is a sickening number when you stop and think about that. And the reality is law enforcement is focused on the top part, and we're not neglecting IMBs, illicit massage businesses, but it is just a tougher cookie to crack. But we have mechanisms in place, and we work with those with our federal and state and local partners to combat them, and we still focus on them. And then obviously everything in the bottom part is reactive. We need to work with our patrol officers, educate our patrol officers, make sure they have a good grasp and understanding on what we're doing and how we do it. And our Department of Family Protective Service reports, our CSA screenings, our hotline, which has just been recently rebranded and has been fully staffed, where we get those tips much quicker, and then general Crime Stopper tips. Some of my best police work done by my detectives has been on a random tip that says there's a 15-year-old, she's at this motel, she's being sex trafficked. Mom called us from Houston, she's crying hysterically, please go recover her baby. And I have nothing more other than an age, a race, and a location. Those are fun because we don't give up. And we're batting 1,000 with those recoveries and also prosecutions, but never discount those tips. The third angle or the third approach to our unit is basically similar to what we're doing today. Educating our school staff, educating healthcare professionals, faith-based organizations, community groups, and hotel and motels. This is your average location where you may, all of these professionals will at one point or another, especially hotels and motels, come across a victim. When I do these presentations to our healthcare professionals that work emergency rooms, think about the time when a victim comes in, sometimes accompanied by the suspect, and they have no idea because they simply have not been taught how to recognize that. The number one person in this group that's not listed is law enforcement. When we created this unit, our cops on patrol across all phases simply did not understand what human trafficking was. They saw prostitutes, they saw drug addicts, they saw somebody who's made some bad choices, And they always thought they can arrest themselves out of this problem, and they're so far from the truth. So we have to implement training for our cops to be better and do better, and then hold them to that better standard. We mentioned this earlier, but the three task forces, we simply would not be able to do this work without the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force. The North Texas ICAC Task Force obviously focuses more on your internet components. So think about it as a, if there's a child victim and then some connection with the online world. It could be a kid meets a person online, that person is an adult, they show up in person, they have sex. It comes under this ICAC umbrella. It comes to us by default. It is not necessarily a traditional child abuse case. The FBI task force detective and obviously the HSI, we talked about that. So imagine when we run these operations, we come together about 60, 70 deep. That is to be really successful. And I am often find myself in kind of, I don't want to say in charge, but in a pivotal point where I just kind of navigate things through, make sure things are flowing. It is a very intense process. It is, again, meaningful work, but we do it all through the partnership aspect. Now, I can sit here and talk about all day long about all the great things law enforcement can do, but I'm going to leave you with this on law enforcement, at least for my folks. I have two expectations out of them. That's one, that's to do anything and everything for the victim. Carrie and I talked about this earlier. The answer is going to be yes, and we'll figure out how later on. If Susan with Unbound Now comes to me and says, hey, Tank, I need X, Y, and Z because it'll benefit this victim, the answer is yes, we will do that. And that is the mindset. It is the wake-ups at 1 o'clock in the morning. It is those long hours because it benefits those victims. It is whatever it may be. And I mean, really, I do mean that. And I hold myself to the same standard. We're going to do it. And the second expectation is, we're simply going to put the suspects in prison. And how we measure that success is by the decade. The more years, the better and more successful we will be, because that is one less suspect that's going to hurt somebody else. And that is obviously not done alone. There's a lengthy justice process in all of this, right? But that's the thing that I set for my people. And we're really good at that. But these people up here, NET, Alliance for Children, Rescue Her, Unbound Now, Traffic 911. And there's so many other awesome organizations. They're the real heroes, because I think everyone NGO in this room or every victim service provider in this room will tell you, we haven't seen a single victim jump up and down, scream and out of joy when we put one of their traffickers in prison. They simply don't. They don't celebrate that. But these people walk the walk with them. And that is why I always say they're the heroes in these investigations, because law enforcement is such a small angle, and the small angle is putting people in jail. Like I said, we do a good job on that. I'm proud of all of our partners, but this is the most important. So, you're thinking like, is he ever going to get to the punchline? Well, here we are. What is human trafficking? And I'm going to make this very simple. Human trafficking is the exploitation of men, women, and children for forced labor or forced sex. Understand something, children under the age of 18, so 17 and younger, we don't have to prove up force, fraud, or coercion. There's an automatic trafficking case, and it's going to come to us. The thing that is really important is to understand that there's no such thing as a child prostitute. And we need to get that terminology completely gone. So what do y'all think? What's less suspicious? A bored teenager on the phone, or a van with free candy marked on it, right? The reality is this. I'm going to tell you, the young lady on the left holding her phone is the most dangerous thing. Those of you that are parents that have teenagers, and if you never set the groundwork on social media, we need to do better, parents, because you're going to teach that 15, 16-year-old how to drive. You're going to send them to driver's ed. You're going to do all those things to make sure they don't wreck your new car. But for whatever reason, we think we can just give them a cell phone and think it's going to be all okay. We need to make sure we stay on top of those phones, that we have access. Build trust. Build that relationship with your child, and healthy barriers and borders. But you need to have access to that phone. And then explain it to your kid, because I'll tell you what, Lance touched on this earlier, it is not a border crimes issue. Sure, we get victims that come from Mexico and other countries and we get victimized, absolutely. But I would venture to say a large bulk of our victims are loved ones here in the area. We know that the internet has changed everything. Social media has changed everything. Here in Tarrant County specifically, there's a couple of truck stops. People are familiar with certain areas of Fort Worth that you'll see potentially some commercial sex occurring out in the street. And we're aware of that. Those of you that are familiar with Dallas, the Blade or Track, Harry Hines, that's the more public eye source, so to speak. But that's bad terminology, right? Because we want to treat those like victims. We want to provide them resources. And so how do we balance it all? When I say the internet has changed everything, the reality is we are moving everything to electronics, digital components, because that is the true way of hiding in plain sight when it comes to human trafficking. You don't see somebody. Back in Arlington in the 80s, Division Street was a track. You would have women walk up and down and sell their bodies. A lot of them were trafficked. We just didn't know any better. We would just arrest everybody. And like I said earlier, we cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem. So we're going to focus the latter part real quick on what we came here to discuss. That was a little bit on trafficking. But FIFA World Cup, really what I want everybody to know, if you don't already know this, it's a very large international level event. It's soccer, okay? And the reality is we're going to have a significant amount of visitors coming in. But as I also touched on this earlier, we're no strangers in hosting big events in Arlington. And because all of our law enforcement, we come together and have each other's back when it comes to hosting and holding up public safety to a higher standard. Now, significant increase in visitors. Really, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to have a bunch of sex work going on or labor trafficking? Not necessarily, but here's how it works. Studies have shown that increased volume of visitors, major events, Super Bowl, which we hosted. If you look at last year's Super Bowl out in LA or San Francisco area, you look at some of those events, did they have a huge uptick in human trafficking? Not necessarily. What happens is, people like myself, we spin up 100 people and say, hey, for the next half a month to a month, we're going to go hammer everything 100%, recover every possible victim, arrest every single possible trafficker. And then when we do data crunching at the end of the operation, we're going to be like, oh, crap, this brought in a bunch of victims and suspects. So keep in mind, it's really how we respond to it, how media makes it sound, how the advertisements and efforts, and there's a lot of that going on. So please don't think that we're going to be in some major crisis come June 14th, 13th, whenever the first game is. We're not, but we're going to be ready. What I fear the most is the unknown. I've already planned out my full next 6 weeks. Told my wife I'll reintroduce myself after July. But the reality is, I'm not scared of that. I'm just really more afraid of what is the unknown going to be when our phones are ringing outside of work hours and recovering victims. But all that say this, there's going to be an uptick, and if human trafficking is a business model, and if I'm a trafficker, and if I have multiple victims, yeah, ideally I'm going to take them where there's a large crowd, because that is where they're going to get exploited. So there is some correlation with that. And that is what we talk about, these significant events and big crowds coming in. So our focus is very simple. We're going to recover victims. We're going to connect them with our amazing victim service providers. Simple. We do that every day, any given day. Every one of our operations, we're going to have an embedded victim service provider, an NGO, that is going to work with law enforcement, that is going to provide victim services. We're going to look for placement more on a short term. We're going to look for placement on a long term. Every case is case by case. Then we're going to hold suspects accountable. We already do that. We're going to just make sure we do that very effectively by having both of our state and federal prosecutors on standby to staff these cases to ensure we don't miss a single step. And we're going to focus on 3 different components: sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and child exploitation. Now, you haven't heard me talk much about labor trafficking. It's still a crime. When you look at human trafficking, there's 2 components. There's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. And We focus more on sex because that is the one that's the more known. It's the more prevalent. Data shows that is the most obvious part of human trafficking. But labor is something that FIFA is going to focus on, and so will we. So those victims that are being here exploited through the labor angle, services are going to be provided for them just as effectively as it is for those sex trafficking victims. We talked about this a little bit already, but increased visitors, that's what fuels the demand. We talked about a little bit about what traffickers will target. They're going to go to exploit hotels, transportation, online platforms. We're going to be aware. With our NGOs, both Unbound now, ourselves, we're going to be presenting multiple presentations coming up later on this month to our major stakeholders in Arlington about awareness. And then, of course, Unbound Now will have several different efforts going on throughout June to provide additional information. Transportation, so Uber drivers, or Lyft drivers, those individuals they're all going to be cross-trained on this, and those were the efforts that we're focused on, get people up to speed on what it looks like. And then, of course, online platforms, which most of it has transitioned to. We're going to really be focused on those. So I'm just going to go over these real quick. These are general red flags. Victims appearing nervous, seem coached, not know what to say. They have simply little control over where they're going, how they got there. Those are all traits that we look for, hotel managers look for, and then say absolute, not one individual bullet here is a concern alone, but once we start stacking them, it's a concern. So we talked about these already, but these are your hotels, the common areas, parking lots, convenience stores, short-term rentals, large event areas, and online platforms are all areas where we may encounter trafficking. So simply, what do we do when something feels wrong? Don't try to confront anything or anybody. Don't be a hero. Simply observe carefully, take proper documentation, take your photos, make your notes. License plates, vehicle descriptions are so critical. Do as much as you can on being a good eyewitness. How to report it? Obviously 911 if you see somebody in danger, and everybody may have a different threshold. Trust me, it's not abuse of 911 if you call us and tell us, hey, I took a human trafficking class and I've seen a woman violently get dragged into a vehicle out of a motel and they're yelling about money. Please call 911 immediately. But if it's something less critical, or something that you see, maybe you're staying at a hotel and you're like, there's a lot of foot traffic going into this room. It seems like almost every hour there's a different man knocking on the door. That's suspicious. I remember that weird guy with the accent in that one class telling me, I should probably report this. This is your time to shine. The human trafficking hotline, you can text it in, you can call it in. Again, those key things you need to remember: location, time, descriptions, vehicle descriptions. That's what matters the most. If you call that number and they'll walk you through that. But really, it's so important to be a good eyewitness more than anything else. The last thing I want to do is have two victims, you and the victim to begin with. So please be very cognizant of that. Our response will be quick. We're going to have our street staff, the police officers, neighboring cities will be ready. And the chances of us already running an operation by the time somebody calls us in is very likely. So we'll be ready to respond. I know I blew through the last slide very quickly, but I also want to respect Carrie's time. This is my contact information, guys. You're welcome to take a picture of this. You have my email, you have my office line. If I can be a resource of any kind, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to help. And I'm going to pass this over to Lance, and we'll have questions later on.
That's like drinking through from a fire hydrant, isn't it? So, but thank you, Thank you, sir, for that. And by the way, if you can't pronounce Tarik's last name or first name is Tarik Muslimovic, you can just call him Tank. That's what his friends and enemies call him. So, but next we have Carrie Grace, who's a dear friend of mine. She's the founder and CEO of Carrie Grace Consulting and has spent more than 15 years serving survivors of human trafficking through trauma-informed care, program development, and leadership consulting. She is the author of 5 evidence-based programs used nationally and internationally across prevention, education, and restoration efforts. Carrie has been trained and advised law enforcement, government agencies, nonprofits, faith-based leaders across the U.S. and internationally, including Homeland Security Investigations, National Victim Assistance Program, and the Philippines National Bureau of Investigations, Cybercrime and Anti-Trafficking Divisions. So she's done some things. She previously served as executive director of Freedom Shield Foundation, where the organization achieved 92% stabilization rate for survivors, which is just crazy to think about. That's a big win. Served through its emergency housing and aftercare programs. Today, Carrie equips leaders and organizations to build healthy teams, prevent burnout, and create sustainable impact through trauma-informed, mission-driven leadership. Welcome, Carrie Grace.
Wow. This is a great group tonight, and I'm so glad that you came out on a Monday night to hear really bad news. You know, not everybody signs up for that. So I just thank you, first of all, that you are a compassionate community member, that you care about things that a lot of times it's easier to just look away. And I feel like when we go and we hear this type of information, if we don't have something we can do about it, then the only choice we have is just to kind of numb ourselves, right? And try to just not think about it anymore, because what he just shared with you is real, and it's happening right here, actually right now. And unfortunately, I've seen it up close and personal for the last over 15 years. And I've sat with the victims. After they've done their work, there's a journey of healing and restoration that has to happen. And it's not easy. I want to share just one example. This was the very first survivor that came into our emergency housing program. This was years and years ago. And she had been trafficked in Oklahoma. And so we sent a transport team to go get her and bring her back into our safe house. And the night started with her being very anxious and nervous. And I want us to take a second to humanize this experience. She had to get in a vehicle with people that she doesn't know, drive to another state. Her cell phone is in a Faraday bag in the trunk, right? Because we want to keep her safe. We don't want anyone to be able to know her location. So she can't reach out to anyone if she starts to feel scared or anxious. And she's going to a location that she doesn't know. We didn't give her the address, right? Put yourself in that position. How vulnerable do you feel? How anxious would you be? And these are the people trying to help you, right? And it still doesn't feel safe yet, right? When she arrived, she hadn't eaten. We get her some dinner, and she took a shower. And then she took another shower. And then she took another shower. And then she took another shower. That was night 1. Can you imagine why she felt the need to just keep showering and trying to wash off everything that she'd experienced? I have good news about her. She ended up getting into an amazing long-term program. We did the first 30 days. We were like the ICU unit of the aftercare space. And it was an amazing program, and she thrived, and she was able to really get healing and went on to get her nursing degree. And she's fantastic. I just love seeing where she's at today. But it takes every single step along the way for her to get there. And we have to be the ones that are laying that pathway down in front of her so that she doesn't get dropped through the cracks, right? So law enforcement does what law enforcement does well. And they need to be freed up to do that and not have to figure out what to do afterwards. That's not what they're geared for. So that's when we have our amazing partners like Unbound, who's here tonight, that can then pick up where they need to step away. And if you've ever seen a relay race, it's just this baton, right? It has to be passed. And it has to be passed in a certain amount of time and space, right? Or you're disqualified. And it's really the same way when you're serving survivors. We have to work seamlessly behind the scenes with other partners. It is a huge collaboration effort. And that baton is just being passed. And the more that we equip ourselves, the more that we go through trainings and we get the knowledge, the more that we're able to successfully hand that baton off on her behalf or on his behalf so that they are able to continue to walk on a path that is well laid and there's not going to be a crack that they're going to fall through, and they can get the healing and the restoration and live out the purpose and identity that God created them for. And so that is why I love getting to share with people like you, because you may be sitting here going, well, I don't have that special skill set. So what am I going to do? I can't go do what he does. What can I do? And I have to tell you, I did not go to college to become someone that worked in anti-trafficking. When I was in college in 92, I didn't even know about human trafficking. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't even know it was a thing. And I was just going to be a counselor. And that's what I was in school for. So this wasn't a plan for me. And then I was a stay-at-home, homeschooling pastor's wife. Okay, can you get any safer than that in a little bubble that you can create for yourself? That's how I was living. And it was as safe as I could be because my life, my childhood was not safe. And so I was trying to fix that with my kids. And one day, my doorbell rings. And 3 women are at my front door, and they said, "We were told if we came here, you would be nice to us." Okay, who sent you to my house? Like, that is weird, right? Who shows up and just says, "We were told you'd be nice to us"? And they didn't have a clipboard, like they weren't selling anything. I couldn't figure out what the context was. They had gone to a church because there was a billboard that said something about, "Do you need financial help?" So these 3 women go into the church because they did need financial help. Well, what the church meant was, do you want to sign up for Dave Ramsey stewardship classes, right? That's what the church meant. They were like, how do we get the money? Okay. So the nice lady's asking them, do you have a relationship with Jesus? And they're like, yeah, like, is that the right answer? Sure. We have a relationship with Jesus and we would love for you to come to our church. Would you like to come to our church? And this is what the women told her. "Oh, we can't come to your church." She said, "Of course you can. Anybody can come." And they said, "No, we're strippers at the club here in Fort Worth. And if we come to your church, we're going to see our customers and they're going to be with their families and they're going to know that we don't belong. So just process all of that." So that lady, for whatever reason, I don't even know who she was, okay? But that lady gave them my name and address. For whatever reason, I was chosen as the person that would be nice to them. But do you see how simple that is? I didn't have a program. I didn't know anything about trauma. I had no special skill set. I was at home trying to be safe. And they came to my front door just because they were told I would be nice to them. So don't overcomplicate this. Don't think you have to be something other than what you are. If you're in this room, there's a reason you're here. It's because you care. And so I want to give you actionable steps so that tonight you don't leave here and go, wow, this is happening and it's coming here in June and what do we do? And I don't know. And then you go home and you have to just numb out because you can't do the next step. So I love Lance's approach. He's like, we're going to give them things to do. So number one, this is your first option. Oh, I have things. I have a slide. We're going to use that. Well, okay. First step, Abigail. Say hey to Abigail. This is my friend Abigail. She is the founder of the Abolitionist Collective, and she has been working. She actually did outreach with me into the strip clubs back in the day when I was still at Valiant Hearts, and we would go into every strip club in DFW every month, and that's where we originally met. And she's continued that on. So she's going to be doing outreach during the World Cup. She does it all the time anyways, but she'll be going during the World Cup to these strip clubs, to some of the, places that you've mentioned, some of those tracks, and meeting women right where they are and just being that compassionate, caring person, showing up in their realm, right? We don't have to wait for them to come to us. So she's actually here tonight, and she may even have a sample of the gifts that she takes, and y'all can go meet her and check that out. But if you want to make a donation, we could sponsor an entire strip club outreach tonight with people in this room just by giving a little bit, if you want to do that. And so there's a QR code. Please scan if you want to give that. And then I'm going to have a second one that you can also give to. And this is if you want to go to the actual gift list where you are able to look at all the items that are going to be in these gift bags, and you are able to go purchase them, and it'll get sent straight to her, and we'll fill those bags. All right. So that's a tangible thing you can do right now tonight if you want to be involved. Second thing we can all do. Y'all get that? Okay. 5 Stones Taskforce. Felicia. Felicia is one of my heroes. I love this woman because she has the purest heart of any leader I've ever worked with. She's in this fight because she cares and she doesn't stop caring. And I don't know how many battles this woman has fought to make 5 Stones a thing, but she just kept fighting them and we're still here. 5 Stones Task Force is an incredible community that she has stewarded for, it started in 2014. And so we've been around for a while now. And this is something you can come to next week. Okay, so next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, you can come and join this community. This is an amazing, vibrant group of law enforcement. You have the nonprofits are there. You have concerned citizens. You have churches represented there. It's the DA's office is there. Like the whole community comes together every single month, and we share a meal and we hear a presentation from another expert that is going to help us all learn and grow in this, and you're able to network and get to know other people in this space. You will absolutely love it. Put it in your calendar and show up Tuesday. I want to come see you face to face. It's from 11 to 12:15. There's the address, and it's open to the public. And if you aren't able to attend in person, we even have an online option. Okay, so either way, we want you to be able to show up, and he will send a follow-up email that will give you all the information that you need for that. But I would love for you to come and join us at 5 Stones and be there every single month. You will absolutely love getting plugged into that community. This is the best task force I've ever been a part of. It's so healthy, and it's actually collaborative. And I'm going to be honest, because I was here back when it started, and we were all nonprofit siloed, afraid of the other nonprofits because they may get my donor dollars. And we were not actually friendly with each other. We were tolerating each other. And she just kept putting us in the room together until we all became friends. I am telling you the truth, okay? And now it is like, this is what I'm talking about, building a pathway underneath survivors that they can actually walk on, because we will call each other. Like he was saying, it may be 2 o'clock in the morning, and I may need to call my friend over at Unbound or the Net, and they're going to answer because we know each other and we're friends and we work together. And that's what she has stewarded. So I love being a part of it. Come and get plugged in. And then if you want to really dive in a little bit more, I would love to have you join me. We're going to just do an easy on-ramp online training. And we will dive into this topic a bit more so that you can really understand the reality of what human trafficking looks like right here in our own community because it does look a certain way in the United States. It looks different in other countries. There are different vulnerabilities here that we want you to be aware of because you have family members, you have friends, you have people at church. And this is the thing. These are kids that are going to school every day. They're still trying to go to school every day. And this is their reality at night or on the weekends. And you may be a school teacher and you want to know, what can I do? Do you know they did a report, this was several years ago, and whenever they interviewed minors who had been trafficked, they asked them, if you had given an outcry, who would you have most likely given that to? And they said, a teacher. So whenever you're training our schools, Tank, and you're getting those educators to understand what's happening, you're equipping really one of the most valuable identifiers in this space. So we're going to open up for Q&A, but one of those 3 steps, like every single one of you can do one of those action steps. So A, you can get involved, go and meet Abigail and let her tell you about the outreach efforts that'll be happening. And there's a lot of groups doing outreach efforts during the World Cups, but I've just gotten connected with her and I love her heart. You can join Five Stones next Tuesday. We will be there for that meeting at 11 o'clock. Or you can join a training with me, or D, you can do all the above. And I think that would be amazing if y'all did. But thank y'all so much for just being a part of this. And we're going to have some Q&A time.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so we're going to do a little Q&A here for just a few minutes before we break. Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, so we'll put the chairs there. So questions about anything that you've heard this evening. Also, as Carrie mentioned, I'll be sending out a follow-up email for everybody that registered. If you didn't register, just talk to me. I'll give you the website. We'll have something there on the website with all the different options, and I'll make sure that you get an email as a follow-up with everything that's going on so you can help on the battle. So questions. Oh, yes, and a hand went up quickly. I thought it was going to be like small group where people, they're quiet, like we've known each other for years, people, so. Yes.
The games, are they all in Arlington or are they spread out through the DFW area? That's something I'd heard.
So we will be hosting 9 FIFA games in Arlington, and then Houston will host a handful. Lance touched on this earlier. Yes, we do expect some traffic between Houston and Dallas, kind of in the realm of not only regular traffic, but also potential victimization up and down. So DPS is on high alert on those, I call them arteries, but all our major highways. But yes, so 9 games in Arlington, and then they're going to be spread across different states. LA will have some, Toronto, Seattle. There'll be a couple other small cities that will host them.
Will there maybe be practice fields? Because I'd heard that it was going to encompass everywhere, the whole DFW area.
So Mansfield is going to be hosting one hotel that is going to be dedicated to one team. And then Dallas, I believe North Frisco will host a second team. All other teams will be flying in for those individual games. Now, that being said, they're focusing really on Fairfield and Dallas and Frisco as your main, they call them month-long parties. As FIFA is going on, imagine those people who are very committed to their teams and their countries are going to go out there, party, and watch those. So there's going to be huge events going on across the Metroplex, but those are going to be your bars, and like I said, Fairfield and then Frisco is going to be, those 2 landing spots will be very, very heavily impacted.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything. This is eye-opening and I guess encouraging. I've called in different scenarios over the years, and I know a big concern when I talk to my friends is how do I preserve my anonymity if I call a tip in, and will there be any way for them to trace it back to me? Because I know that seemed to be like a barrier for people to get involved.
So absolutely, you can remain anonymous by calling 911 and just saying, I want to remain anonymous. and we will respect that. We won't follow up. If we have absolutely critical information that we may need, we may touch base with you. You can still remain anonymous. The hotline, 100% ability to remain anonymous. You don't even give them half the tips I get are, no information from who it's coming in through. And it's our job to vet that information and then go from there. But I'll be honest, tips are great, and even that limited scope is phenomenal. But often the urge that our detectives, investigators have is to call somebody like, hey, did you maybe see this or that? And that pivotal answer can help us dictate which direction we go in. So maybe you want to, and we will respect the privacy. We won't put you in our arrest affidavits and investigative narratives. But if you guys can at least leave us a possible follow-up phone number, that'll be really amazing.
So I apologize if I say it incorrectly or if I say it without sensitivity, but what your earlier, Sergeant Tank, you mentioned that the reality isn't that the World Cup is bringing the victims; it's that the victims are already here. So the supply is already here; just the demand is increasing because of what's happening.
Might have misspoken, and part of that is correct. So what I was trying to convey is, so imagine FIFA World Cup was not happening. We right now, and Carrie touched on this, we have victimization going on right now. Okay, there's victims out there, so there is a supply, and there's men out there right now, and there's a demand. What happens with large events is, imagine we heard Lance talk about 35,000, give or take, coming in every day into our country. There's going to be thousands. I think, for example, AT&T Stadium is going to hold, I think, like 120,000 people. Okay. And then plus imagine everything around Texas Live, that entertainment district in Arlington. Let's say we have 200,000 people. What traffickers are going to do is, those traffickers are trafficking victims in LA, trafficking victims in Memphis, in Oklahoma City, in Houston. They're going to want to come over here because now there's a higher demand. So they do still bring victims to where the party is at, so to speak, for the higher probability of exploiting those victims.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hi, friends. From a global perspective, some of our friends coming into this country are coming from countries that it's legal to buy sex. What's happening that you're seeing from a cultural awareness that whenever they get off the plane, they're handed a packet saying, you're going to go to jail if you do this.
So I do believe that one way to introduce them to our Texas Penal Code is when they break the law, they go to jail. But I'm also being cautious of, in all seriousness, of our jail populations are going to be something we're going to monitor. There's absolutely going to be countries visiting our beautiful community here where in countries really laws aren't mimicking ours, where commercial sex exists, where prostitution is legalized. And then we're going to have people with some very deep pockets coming over here. And the reality is this, and my standard is going to remain the same. You break the law, we're going to hold you accountable. I cannot control what they're going to hand them, and they are going to be educating them, and there's going to be education at airports, and there's going to be training put on by 821 and other orgs that are going to be educating our folks about human trafficking, and then some about laws. But that doesn't give anybody the exception to come here and break them. If I travel to any country or any state, and I do that often, the first thing I do is like, what is against the law? And if it's questionable, it's probably something I shouldn't be doing. So we're prepared for all that. And the FIFA World Cup organizers have also talked to us about, well, if we do arrest somebody related to a team, staff member, player, some higher profile individual, how do we treat them? And we're all on the same page. We're going to treat them the same way, utmost respect, and prosecute them.
Amen.
Tank, Carrie, thank you for what you're doing. Abby and all the other organizations. A couple questions. First, what along those lines, and similar to what the gentleman over here said, do they have an outreach as far as FIFA goes? When they go into these, they know what's coming. And I know with other cultures, it's a little bit different, but I didn't know if you were working in tandem with them. That's question one. Question two is, what's a win look like for you overall through this event or events? And then last, the comment, I hope it's to an absolute minimum, the evil that's occurring, and you put some bad people away. Okay?
Love it. To the first question, as far as outreach, we're going to have FIFA in the conjunction with some of these organizers are going to have outcry tents or tents set up where people can come and disclose outcry victimization, whether it be labor or sex, and they're going to be immediately connected with resources. And I hope I understood that question correctly. So FIFA, not only are they stepping in, but I've had dozens of meetings with them about when somebody's ready to disclose, well, let's make sure they don't fall through the cracks, like Carrie mentioned earlier. And that is something that is absolutely a non-negotiable. We're going to have to respond every single one of those calls. What's going to happen a lot is that my team and I are going to be responsible for is vetting that information that comes in. A lot of citizens are going to be calling in what they believe to be human trafficking. Think about the airports and the signage at airports. Think about how many phone calls DFW Airport Police is going to get and HSI is going to get on possible trafficking that they see at the airport. I welcome all phone calls because that is the only way we can be 100% certain we're not missing anything. And as far as success, obviously, I wish it never existed. Not World Cup. I love soccer, but the evil that comes potentially behind major events, or the evil that exists right now in our backyard. Right? I wish people wouldn't break the law. I wish people wouldn't victimize others and exploit others. But I will say this: what success looks like, because we live in a realistic world and we have to have realistic expectations. And I am a hopeful man, but also hope is not a plan. But I'll tell you something: looking at everybody in here, and after Carrie's speech, there is hope. Right? There's ways to connect, and there's amazing partners like Unbound Now and so many others I displayed earlier. So hope or success is going to look like any victim that comes into our region that's victimized, we're going to have a resource for them. We're going to have a bed for them. We're going to have a nurse willing to accept them, wrap their hands around them, provide a sexual assault exam. And we're going to have long-term care and placement for them down the line. Meanwhile, law enforcement, we're going to step in. We're going to prosecute the suspect, hold them accountable, no matter where they're from. And then we're going to have an awesome DA, both on the state and on the federal side, take that to the finish line while we obviously keep our hands wrapped around the victim and make sure their needs are met. That is any time end goal, or what I would envision a perfect response.
Any other? Yes. We use the mic.
All right, thank you. So I've been to other states' airports where they have the signs that show the universal sign for I'm being trafficked. How come DFW doesn't?
So they're required under federal law to have them displayed. I just don't know, and I'll be honest with you, I'm in such a rush when I'm at the airport, so I can't for certain say
They're
that.
probably in the women's bathroom.
Well, they could, and they should, quite frankly, have them in both. And the reality is, if now that you mentioned that, I can follow up with that with our partners at DFW Airport, and just see signage is standardized. It's supposed to be displayed across all of airports in the same manner. It's with the same information, and we deviate on that a little bit once we get into hotels, beauty salons, and some of that. And then we kind of come to a different level of display, but they should have them. I can tell you they're going to have billboards coming up. They're going to have commercials you're going to be seeing. Now, especially that you guys have seen or listened to us, and I apologize, it was so rapid, it was so fast, but you're going to start seeing these commercials. You're going to be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what they were talking about. So more and more information will be coming out, and I know we're about less than a month out from kickoff, but this is when their campaigns are going to be pushing out.
Okay. Yeah, because like I was in Florida, and they have it in the stalls on the back of the door, so when you go in, you see it. But I've never seen it. I've never seen it at DFW anywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. So that's absolutely critical.
Did I hear you say there's a North Texas hotline?
So it's the human trafficking hotline. It's going to be a national one.
National one. Okay,
Yes,
not one just for specific for us.
No, sir.
Okay.
When you follow the money, where do you think it leads? One. And secondly, would you give some examples tonight? I never really thought about the labor exploitation, and is that really going on? And can you have some of the examples of somebody busted from a sweatshop or something like that?
Sure. So quick on the money. Money is going to honestly funnel into two type of components. One is going to be cash, which is it's not as common. It's Cash App, if those of y'all are familiar with, and then those entities feed into actual banks. My team does a really good job about seizing. When we write search warrants for these entities, we also go after asset forfeiture. So if we believe that money has been raised and obtained through a criminal enterprise, we seize it and then give it over to the state, and the state dictates where the money goes. But that is it is not by mistake that $230 billion criminal industry that is called human trafficking exists, because it is very rich in that component. And there's nothing greater that you can see me outside driving a very nice vehicle that was seized from a trafficker. So I take pride in that, and my detectives do too. Secondly, on labor exists. It is still prevalent in our communities. Not necessarily sweatshops. That's not something you're going to see here. You're going to see that one individual who came here into our country, who is working your 15, 16, 18-hour long days with no breaks, minimal to no pay, and then there's threats behind that. Or if they try to leave, they're going to harm their family overseas. Or if they try to leave, they're going to call the police and report them and get them deported. A very other common place for labor trafficking that occurs is illicit massage businesses. Those women are brought in here for the facade of our false narrative of being a massage therapist, and they start giving massages legally. And then they get told, you know what? Now all the money you're doing for massages is going to come to me. If you want to make some money, if you want to pay off your debt that you owe us, you can start performing sex acts, and we'll split that money, but the actual massage money is still going to come to me. And oh, by the way, if you don't, these are the consequences. So that is your very modern day of looking at labor trafficking and sex trafficking all within one establishment.
This is not FIFA related, but I have been to a few movie theaters in town and a few restaurants where I've seen some really young girls that are by themselves, like dressed very provocatively, running around with cell phones, and they don't seem to have any adults. Is there a gypsy group that lives in our community that are those girls that we should look out for, or does that sound like anything that's happening in Fort Worth? It's kind of scary to see them.
Yeah, it could be a lot of different things. I'll let Carrie touch on that too. From just my perspective, it is young women or youth dressed provocatively or sexually dressed. I'm sorry, it's 2026. That is not alone a indicator. I'll tell you, most of my undercover operations, when a woman shows up thinking they're going to have sex with me in a covert operation, they're in an oversized T-shirt and sweatpants with messy hair. It's not Julia Roberts from Pretty Woman. Come on, anybody else? The ref movie? Come on. But so it's not that. And so, but those are all concerns. Yes, ma'am. I mean, especially if you're seeing youth that you suspect are underage, then that's concerning. And is there? Yes, there's a gypsy presence in our communities. Absolutely, they do exist.
Yeah, I would just add to that the overall demand in our culture has created this dynamic where I think young girls feel pressurized to just sexualize themselves on a regular basis because that's what they're being told. That's what they're being shown all the time, is that this is the value now that I have. And so the demand culture, I think, would be the biggest indicator as to why we see young girls presenting themselves that way, just in general. And then I think also I've seen youth, this would be more of a concern or a red flag for me, or those that are working parking lots of gas stations and they're selling, candy bars, some weird art or whatever. And that is something that I think is a labor trafficking situation. But I've seen a lot of youth that are kind of, operating in those types of situations. And that is something I would say would be worthy of reporting if you see that type of activity.
Thank you guys so much for sharing with us and spending your time this evening to equip all of our people here to get ready for the World Cup. So please give Carrie and Tarik a hand. Thank you.